Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 31 of Syncing with ServiceNow. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got a panel of three, counting me, and at some point, if Fred Reynolds ever figures out how to work Zoom, we'll have a panel of four. We're kind of making fun of him. Let me do the commercial real quick. If you're a ServiceNow customer or you want to be, and maybe you want to be and you can't afford it, you're at the right spot. XenTegra can help. I just had lunch with a former employer who said they want ServiceNow, but they moved to something else because they couldn't afford ServiceNow. Like, wait a minute, we could have helped you with our managed instance that includes a very cost-effective, right-sized monthly subscription for ServiceNow products, depending on what product you're looking for. There's also the opportunity to take advantage of this platform that's magical and capable. If you're adopting ServiceNow for a ticketing system, don't do it. If you're adopting ServiceNow because you want to start with a ticketing system and grow and do something that runs your business, starting with IT but branching out into other things, then you've come to the right place with ServiceNow and XenTegra. With that, I've got Eddie McDonald on with us. Eddie's a longtime ServiceNow business development and at one point even a coder. Eddie, how's it going?
It's going really well. Thank you.
Last time you coded something or developed something on the ServiceNow platform was when?
It was on Geneva was the last line of code I wrote. I started in Berlin, actually during the Aspen Berlin changeover, and I banged out some code for a few releases. And then I'm like, I'm rather just talk to people. So I hung up my keyboard.
But you talk to people about it now. You've been on lots of the lineages of the different platforms, and you actually did it at one point. So that makes very legitimate to be talking to people about how they're going to use the technology and be successful with it.
100%. Yes.
So we got Fred in the chat window, or excuse me, he's in the chat window over here, but he's in our audience right now. We're going to leave him in there for just a minute to make him suffer for not coming in on time. Mike Sabia is with us. Mike is our master architect. Mike is really doing amazing things working with our current and future clients. Mike, most exciting thing you've talked to someone about in the last week as it relates to ServiceNow?
I mean, just the Washington, D.C. release itself, which we're here to talk about today. ServiceNow continues to make great progress in its platform. Now, ServiceNow has kind of started pushing some of its products into store releases so that if, let's say, Strategic Portfolio Management has an update, it is possible to get some of those updates outside of these twice yearly releases, but the foundational changes that affect everything go in these releases.
Would you call ServiceNow a platform you can be very agile on, and based on what you just said, it's kind of agile itself?
I do. I absolutely agree with that. Now, 10 years ago, 11 years ago when I started, the power of ServiceNow was the ability to customize. And you can still do that, but ServiceNow has grown and now has a lot of the capabilities that customers needed to customize for. And so as much as possible, we try to stay out of box in order to reduce or eliminate that technical debt, but absolutely powerful for anything you need.
That's a story I hear all the time. And I want to tell folks out there that if you're working with a partner like XenTegra, we can have that conversation open on the front end. We don't want you to develop down a path where you're going to have to pull back. We want to go to ServiceNow with you and find out, hey, is this something coming in the next release or two? So that you don't develop in such a way that's going to cost you more money later, and you get something that's standardized on the platform. Let me do this with Fred. We let Fred out of the penalty box. And had him sitting there in the audience. Two things, Fred. What was the one thing you developed ahead of time with ServiceNow that you had to go back and undo so that you could adopt something that was built into the platform?
Oh man, it was back in the early days. I'd probably say around event management, alarm management.
CSM? Did we have to rebuild that? Because we built it
pretty sure.
Yeah,
it was everything from a managed services perspective. The main separated instance with managing, managing customers through it. So there was a lot of things early out 10 years ago that we started with that we had to develop to go back and undo.
So you paid to do it and you had to pay to undo it, but it was the right move to undo it?
Yeah, and a lot of that was just really the way that the company we were with did things, but at the same time, it was things that just weren't out of the box and workflows that were built into ServiceNow, which I believe today they really are.
Yeah. Now, Fred and I have had some discussions with some other peers as well about the fact that it seems like some of our inspired ideas on how to improve the platform have magically gotten into the ServiceNow platform, whether that's inspired ServiceNow or it's something a little more copied is another discussion. But we've always made good progress in doing what we need.
Absolutely. Well, I will give credit to ServiceNow. They want to go that customer journey with them. So when I was a customer, I spent a lot of time with them around feedback as to what was not in the platform. So obviously I've said it many, many times on these podcasts, right? They've done a good job of investment in their own product. And I think it's from listening to customers and partners as well.
Yeah. You guys-
Hey, Andy, before you
guys
move on,
like,
you touched on something that's kind of important there for a second, because you talked to Mike about, customization back in the past and how it's built now. The folks here at XenTegra, we're going to be consultants first. We're not order takers. We're not going to execute blindly a vision. We want to talk about it and make sure that the platform is built on a solid foundation, scalable for the future, so we don't have to go back and rebuild later on, or even worse, Z-boot from a really nightmarish implementation. So that's a big differentiator with us and a lot of other partners, is that we want to understand your business and give you good advice.
So Eddie, do we not get a lot of pushback from our investors by, thinking long-term with our customers?
Sometimes we do, but it's the price we pay for doing good business. We're
Well,
not
that was a joke. We don't have any
It was a
investors
joke.
to answer to.
I thought you were referencing another company that has
No.
conversations with us.
No, look, we can be client for life, long-term oriented, because we don't have to worry about Wall Street or some type of quarterly objective that some private equity firm has got us handcuffed to. Speaking of spending money to make money, Fred Reynolds, we got our knowledge conference related madness coming up, ServiceNow Knowledge, and we wanted you to tell our listeners what that's all about as we go into it before we jump into talking about the Washington, D.C. release.
Well, I'm super excited about this year's knowledge. One, it's in May 7th through the 9th, and there's so many different events, classes, knowledge that can be gained as a customer and as a partner there as well. So I actually went to my first one last year, which is funny, out of the 10 years I've been on the platform. And the classes are really incredible. A lot of co-led with customers, customer use cases. You can learn a lot in all the different areas. We're going to have a nice booth and a nice presence this year as well. Andy, as you know, we have a big party that we're having on the night of the 8th, I believe it is. We're giving away our trip. And we also have a customer appreciation dinner we're doing on the 9th before the end ceremony.
Yeah, we're going from year one, not doing anything but attending, to year two, making a big splash.
And we're going to have a large presence there too. I don't want to make that unknown. We're going to probably have 10 plus, of XenTegra resources there to talk to our customers and spend time with our customers and walking around and meeting people and learning.
Yeah.
That's interesting, Fred, because, from a customer perspective, I love, this is going to be my 6th knowledge. I love nerding out with our customers and talking about the challenges they're having and proposing solutions. And from a customer's perspective, they get all this vision from free resources. They're just hanging out and talking to them. So it's a good time to come by and say hi.
And it really is that environment where customers can meet customers, and there's so much information out there. They can share their use cases of what they're going through and talk to people that's actually implemented it. So it's very helpful.
So I tell this story all the time. If I'm repeating myself, I'll make it quick. I'd love setting up these conferences, having customers go, buying passes. I think we're doing 10 or 20 free passes this year. And I love introducing two customers who don't know each other to each other. And then later in the week, they're walking down the hall. They walk right past me and don't even notice I'm there. That's like nirvana.
Yeah, it's so helpful.
All right. So the blog we brought forward today, Mike did, and we're going to go through, and it's from John Sigler from March 20th, 2024. So it just came out. And the title of it is Fast Time to Value, Introducing the Now Platform Washington, D.C. release. Mike, why did you bring this one?
It's timely and pertinent. The Washington, D.C. release was just announced, or rather just went GA, generally available. Just preliminary early release before that. So it's now available for customers to install with that first patch. And as I mentioned before, the releases are ServiceNow's ability to make changes that impact all the products. If there's maybe a specific product, sometimes you'll see them in store releases outside of the main releases, but this is its opportunity to make some of those foundational changes, and we'll talk to a couple of those, as well as release some new capabilities.
Yeah. Fred, as a former platform owner for a large corporation, what do these releases mean to you, both the good and the bad.
Oh man. So as a platform owner in the past, it was always current for me to stay as current as possible. So I never want to get past N-1. So I wanted to always be on the latest and greatest to make sure that we were keeping up with, any customizations we were doing and making sure we stayed current with the platform. The bad is usually when you get a system like this in a large enterprise environment, it's really hard to keep up with the workload that the organizations are passing at you. Therefore, you end up with a lot of stories, a lot of work, and you never can really take advantage of what is coming out that latest release. You're usually, several releases behind on the capabilities you're trying to introduce. So those that have got that figured out, kudos for them. But most large companies I talk to today, they're still trying to work on, not base level stuff, but just things like their relationships and their CMDB and trying to get more out of automation in that way. When you can get as far advanced as being on the latest platform and using its capabilities, I think you're in a really great space. I just think it's hard to get there.
And Eddie, for you, what excites you for customers as far as the opportunity to get to the next release?
It's an interesting question because not that it could be taken as a negative, but a new release is a litmus test for what you've done the previous year. Did you build something that was breaking good or best practice? The skip report is going to tell you that after you put a new version in. So as Mike was saying, that configuration is possible, but customization is better. Let's not.
Well, I think you swapped those.
Oh,
but,
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. Yes, yeah, we're going to configure the platform, not customize it just for you. That way, when we get our new releases like DC, we can implement them. We can see, it gives you a report, what's working well, what's not. And so that's one of the exciting pieces that we get to understand, that our platform remains healthy as we go forward.
There are some uses and place for customization. That's what we discussed in our workshop, saying, hey, yes, this is what you had in the past. Are we trying to have the old system on ServiceNow, or are we trying to use best practices as much as possible? And sometimes we do have to do a little bit of customization. But that's based on an assessment and a risk acceptance.
Andy, I think that was a great question, by the way, and I think we're going to come back to that a couple times through this conversation, this blog, because as I read the blog, I thought that, like, wow, this is really takes you from things you were trying to create in or outside of the platform to solve use cases where it was very troubling, to now it's more native in the platform. So it's a really great question. It's just one of those, to get to the latest release, you got to be ready as a company to use what they're introducing.
Yeah. Hey,
Right.
I'm going to call a quick audible. Mike, just give me the 3 to 5 things that people need to be most aware of before they make the move to the next release.
Any release, you have to be aware of the fact that, as Eddie mentioned, when you do upgrade, there's going to be skips. You need to pay attention to those skip records and assess them based on their priority scale. Is this something that I need to address, or is it something like some form that I can kind of, wave my hand at? As far as what Fred was saying before, yes, it's awesome that there's all these new capabilities, but for a customer who's first starting, there's a lot of foundational work you need to do before you add in a new capability that's just released. But also, to what he mentioned before, when you are perhaps evaluating the need to do something that ServiceNow does not provide, you need to make sure that it's not coming down the road. And if it is something you really, really need, are you going to delay? Are you going to put in a preliminary version? Do you now need to upgrade to that product? When Fred and I worked together, but previously, we had done a lot of great work with CSM or CSM type stuff, and then ServiceNow came out with CSM, and we had to do some refactoring. So always have to be careful about where you are and where you're going.
Yeah, that's interesting, Mike, because, having folks like you and the rest of our architects here that have those intimate relationships with ServiceNow and have those points of contact, I can't tell you how many times in my career, dozens and dozens of times, when a customer wanted something implemented that was coming out in their next release. And because we knew that, we could save them money by not redoubling down on our work, but also save them from having to reverse back to out of the box later on. So yeah, that's great.
That's true.
All right. So Mike, the first section here talks about, oh, look at this. We made it to the first one. We're talking about AI, new generative AI capabilities. This is really what becomes real in the Washington DC release?
Well, I mean, Gen AI has already started to be released, and two main areas that they've already worked on is some development tools to enable the developer to work faster. And they've also done a lot of generative AI around customer service management, so case summary. So if a new person is looking at it, they can have a quick summary of that ticket. I'm not going to go into all the details of there, but the things that are focused on in this blog are the fact that they are doing AI around ITOM. So if you get an event or alert out of another system, yes, you can ingest that into ServiceNow and act upon it. But the new Gen AI capabilities that are released in Washington, D.C. have to do with the ability for ServiceNow to read rather cryptic logs and get information out of that in order to say, hey, this is something you're going to have to worry about in a day. That alert's going to be coming soon. You need to kind of be aware of that right now rather than when it happens.
And you don't understand how valuable that is for a company that's basing their uptime, their credibility on, something that's reading in alarms and logs in that way. This is very neat, very proactive, and preventative versus being reactive. So it's a game changer to be doing this.
Eddie, do you think people understand what that means to them?
I would hope, because the folks that work in operations, they are obviously a little more technical, but this step that Mike just outlined is ServiceNow telling you what the problem is versus telling you there's a problem and figure it out.
Yeah.
It's very much, here you go get to work on the fix versus let's go figure out the problem is and then fix it. So yeah, the time saved alone is well worth the investment.
And I've got this little Andyism thing about all roads lead to Rome, all roads lead to ServiceNow, and then all roads lead from Rome, all roads lead from ServiceNow. I mean, this is that all roads lead from ServiceNow moment where it's proactively telling people this is happening. Here's what you need to do to go fix it. Now, use, I guess, your human elements to figure out if that's correct or not, or just let me go fix it. That's what the promise of this is.
Yes.
But it's also the same story of, do you want a lot of people to fix something, or do you want to do that automation and put smarts behind it to make sure you can take on more work with less people or the same amount of people? And these are the steps that help you do that.
It's funny. I just had lunch with a former colleague of mine who retired about a year ago. And when he retired, they had to hire 4 people. Well, he was basically manually able to script and automate all this stuff without the power of AI. That next generation is going to have the benefit of leveraging AI to maybe stay small-ish and maybe even get down to 1 person again. That equates to the math to where this helps save money.
Yep.
All right, next section is still talking AI, responsible and purpose-built AI. Mike, what's this covering?
It's just talking about the fact that AI is growing. There's a roadmap for it. You have additional UI generative AI use cases, and one of those examples is this Star Coder 2. So ServiceNow wants ServiceNow, the product, to be readily accessible. They want customers to be able to adopt it quickly, and that means reducing the implementation cost. So, or the effort to make customizations or configurations after your initial implementation. And Star Coder 2 is a LLM regarding coding capabilities, and it's a partnership between ServiceNow, NVIDIA, and a couple others where they have an LLM about coding standards, and that will speed up coding, get improvements out there quicker.
Fred, thoughts on this?
No, I mean, I think that is awesome. I mean, it's like Mike said. I mean, if there's always a sometimes a significant cost to standing things up, things moving forward, and a time associated with that. So anything that can be automated or done in the way that's that builds it faster, that gets it out there faster is a strong plus. I like to start seeing some of that in place. I honestly haven't seen it yet, so that would be interesting to see. Mike and I and the architects have had conversations around some of this AI when it comes to code development or implementation. So haven't got experience with it yet, Andy, but looking forward to seeing what it can do.
There are some good courses on how to use Gen AI in various use cases, whether it be improving development or customer service management. There are some great courses on Now Learning for that, which talk about the value of it, and then also what the effort is to make that happen. Now, ServiceNow does use its own LLM. It's not going out to OpenAI or anything like that, so it's not as if your proprietary information has to go out there. But if you need to create a summary of a ticket, it's all within ServiceNow's LLM, and you can make those advantages.
Yeah.
The takeaway here is also the financial impact. So, ServiceNow led with the low code, no code several years back, and that took off. And this is just the next iteration of that, where AI is helping you, write this code, incorporating those 600 different languages. So you're getting to your finished product faster with fewer human errors. So, and that's just all about saving money.
Right now, using generative AI is not free. It takes computing power, and ServiceNow does have costs associated with using generative AI, which there's predictive AI in the platform that doesn't cost additional cost, but for generative AI there are some costs associated with that, and there's documentation about how to make those business cases. Here's the cost, but here's the savings you see. Hey, maybe it'll cost us money, but if I can have one less developer or one less implementer, or speed up my systems to be able to respond to events before the alert happens, that saves money. Spend money, save money.
Yeah.
Next section talks about intelligent automation. Mike?
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the first one, Workflow Studio, that's mentioned here. So ServiceNow has already had Flow Designer and Process Automation Designer and Decision Builder in ServiceNow, but they're kind of bringing it together. So Flow Designer is your low code, no code flows that replace business rules. Where Process Automation Designer comes in play is one, if you have logic says, hey, based on this condition, do this, based on this condition, do that, that's great. But if you have a third condition, you don't want to have to recode it. So it's the ability to have decision tables. And in this release, they're bringing it together, the Flow Designer, the Process Automation Designer, PAD, and Decision Builder all into one tool, speed up the development and the understanding of what's happening.
Fred, as a business owner under your current role and your previous role, what excites you about this?
Well, I mean, anytime you can create a tool set for your development teams to work faster with and more efficiently, I mean, you always get excited because you got to see that makes them a whole lot more efficient at what they do. I think this is a little bit beyond what I've ever done at the platform, as far as I've never written any code. I've never done that. So Eddie may have a little bit more experience there. But from owning tools and building tools, I mean, this is another step in making sure that those that are configuring on the platform have a lot more tools at their disposal.
And just to be clear, my coding skills today are very similar to a monkey in front of a typewriter. So don't.
But that may be the perfect. That may be perfect for the next generation. Right. Right.
Well, look, as it is with Flow Designer, Mike, that's the way it's intended. The Flow Designer is to drag and drop and to build things, so you don't have to have that coding experience. It's more process.
For simple stuff, for sure. It's when it's more complex that you need to, consider exactly what you want to accomplish.
Sure.
Those flows can become complex, and it might be better to do your process design a little differently or break it into components. Even though Process Flow Designer is not customization, going back to that previous topic, that still means it has to be designed, and you need to have a good partner who can do that rather than say, hey, you want this, let me just start coding or start creating flows. You need to plan those for them to be most useful.
So next topic is called simplified experiences. How does DC enable that?
Well, so over the last couple of years, you've seen that use of workspaces has improved the usage of the ServiceNow platform. When that first came out, it was focused at the tier 1. Now it's focused for the actual use and support of the product. And this is another place where they are looking to have a better experience around different areas of ServiceNow. And one example of that is the sales and order management, which provides a visual understanding of what has been ordered, what has been, what's available, and how you order those additional information. It's a better UI around that. And then secondly, they've also improved the performance analytics reporting across the whole ServiceNow platform, from surfacing real-time information and creating the triggers and leveraging AIOps to support the service operations workspace.
Yeah, Fred, can you translate what he just said?
Well, I would tell you the way I look at this simplified experience in sales and order management because there's multiple applications on the platform, right? This is another application there that's around procurement, around sales enablement. So I think what Mike's saying is they've had this out for a couple of years. Now they're really enhancing that to simplify the experience of operating with it, right? Of the dashboards, the workflow that comes out. It's a simple click through to see it and better reporting. So I think this is just more enhancements came in Washington to make it more simplified in that procurement space, which is one that is interesting, Andy, because again, a lot of entry point in the service now is around IT and maybe even ITOM if they have that, just IT related stuff. Not as many people, just as aware of HRSD, the procurement, the sales cycle, but ServiceNow does it all. And I think the more and more every release comes out, they're really hitting every one of those areas and making the dashboards a lot easier, simplified to work with it. And this is just another one of those.
Yeah. So ServiceNow has had the capability to integrate with your suppliers for some time, whether you have to, order laptops or boxes of whatever that, sometimes millions of dollars a month, but it was purely transactional. I think the upgrade here is all of that additional visibility. I mean, they're talking about you can get quotes and order tracking. There's a lot of bells and whistles that is more than just a point and click and hit send and wait for your boxes to arrive.
This to me seems like a really obvious example that ServiceNow is going both deep and wide within the platform. And now we're, encroaching on other areas around, business delivery.
Well, it's about information, I mean, we're all used to, we order something from Amazon. We want to know, we want the email to know they got it. We want to know when it's been sent. We want to track it when it gets here. I mean, that's the world we live in now. And big businesses are the same way. They want this information in a click.
And
Right.
I think it's pointing out too, having all this information, having the analytics on top of that. And this is not just helping you with your process and making sure end to end it's better. It's applying analytics to that, and now with AI automation on that too to make it even more efficient. Sorry, Mike, I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say, for those who've been on the ServiceNow platform for many years, there's the old traditional UI with all the list views. And for people who are familiar with that, that's super quick. But for people who are not familiar with it, it looks a little archaic, maybe a little confusing. And this is another area where ServiceNow is putting its new UI around its capabilities. Previously, it was around workspaces. Now it's about, sales and order management.
I want to tweak something I heard Eddie say, all this information with a click. I think what we're really talking about here now is all this information without even having to do the click.
Yeah, just on your board, right?
It's happening. You've pre-programmed it. Citizen developer maybe even pre-programmed it. And now we've got the power of the digital transformation version 18 or whatever it is for your organization has now finally come full circle and in theory come to life.
Right. For example, there's reorder rules where like, hey, I always want to have 20 mice in my storeroom. As you drop below a certain number, you reorder. But the ability to set that up, to configure what those rules are, the trigger, all of that's in the new UI, make it a lot more accessible.
Yeah, you know what? It's been interesting to me because since Fred's come on board and you guys have started working with some of our vendors, like we're not working with our vendors that we work with, that we resell their products, not ServiceNow, but our products, their products we resell. It's interesting to me how many of them are using ServiceNow to manage their back end, which includes things like, reorders and getting their products and their platforms out to the customers who are buying them and supporting them.
Yeah.
All right, last section here talks about extensibility. Mike, what are they trying to get across?
So the common service data model is something that ServiceNow is fully embraced the last few years. The idea that you don't just have, CIs or assets or the like. It's how everything tied together. You have the foundational data of users and locations, departments, and then you go into your code, you're building it, you're managing your technical services such as your server or your prod, test, dev servers. But then there's the business services that sit on it and the business applications you sell. So if somebody reports, hey, I have a problem with my email, you would be able to see, well, that's not a CI. What CI might be causing the problem? You'd be able to have service mapping in order to see what CIs support that service. And similarly, when you're scheduling a change and you're going to be bringing a server down, you can see what services it can impact. And what ServiceNow is doing here is operationalizing it a little bit more. Not just having it an association in this of dependencies, but actually having process around it. And this might be a topic that probably deserves its own blog discussion or podcast discussion. It's hard to go into all the details in a limited amount of time.
Yeah. So Fred, you immediately said, yeah, this deserves its own. Why did you?
I think so, because at one point ServiceNow had like that slogan, it's a unifying platform. And people say, well, what do you mean by it's a unifying platform? And I think the CSDM is really, it's more of a standard, right? Like it's not really an application, it's part of the core platform, but it's a guideline to follow to way you're storing data so that it's accessible across all the applications, across all the users on the platform. So that way you're finding a way to capture as much data as possible. Now with the use of AI and things that can crunch data a lot quicker, I mean, I think there's more use out of it. But that's why I think it could deserve its own, because I think breaking down and understanding what that is, a lot of customers even have ServiceNow are not aware of how to use it, how to implement it, or how to apply it.
And what I love about the platform, right, is if you do start applying it to different pieces of your business, they will, at least it feels like, kind of organically come together through the software in this common database.
Or it's actually not even organically, it's by design they come together. That was one of the core pieces, that those silos will be broken down, and having that end-to-end platform that can go from one side of the organization to the other. Now we're going to drop Gen AI on top of that. The whole organization can benefit.
So Eddie, I agree. At the same time, when we start working with customers on the ServiceNow platform, and I can see that as long as they're not fighting it, it will organically just start to pull stuff in. And even if they didn't have a plan, strategy, it's happening.
Yeah, it's on our side, it's by design. On their side, it's organically.
Yeah. As long as they're not fighting it. And occasionally you find some that just keep a bunch of disparate systems, and you're like, just let it happen. Sorry.
Well, what you do is you put a certain module in place and you make the other parts of the organizations jealous. That jealousy has sold a lot of deals.
Well, yes, if it's done right, and if that first one put in place is successful. How many, Fred, have you seen where that first one wasn't successful and they're going the opposite direction, where they're trying to rip it out? We're going, what are you doing?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very common.
Yeah. All right, guys, did we cover it?
I believe we did.
We did.
Anything, Mike, last word from you? Anything we didn't cover you'd want to cover?
Any release of ServiceNow has a lot of different capabilities, and you can go to the release notes to see exactly what is included in that, or go on to ServiceNow's learning platform, Now Learning, to find out more about that release. And of course, you can always come to XenTegra to say, hey, I'm interested in this component. What does this mean for me? And we'll have a practical discussion about what your needs are and how we can map ServiceNow to meet those imperatives and objectives.
And how much would that cost them?
To have discussions with us, that's part of pre-sales motion. That's free.
It's part of being a good partner.
Mm-hmm.
Fred, anything you want to cover we didn't cover?
Well, I would say, as someone who's bought, implemented, supported a lot of software through the years, when it comes to new releases, software release for those new releases, this is an important thing to look at. I mean, do you have the right software that you have, your platform? Because you see every release that ServiceNow has come out with, I think since it started, has a long list of things it's doing. It's so big right now, they have big topics, right? They don't have all the documentation. They have it, I'm sure, Mike. You probably go look at that stuff, but they have so much detail in this, as opposed to some products when you get that new release and it's 15 bug fixes, right? And it may be one new little feature. I just want to stress the fact that every single release of ServiceNow has really big ticket items that help our customers get more use out of it.
Right. And in fact, the releases are really focused around making material changes. If you just have a bug that comes out in the patch releases
Oh, that's good to
over the
know.
course of the
Yeah.
year. So the releases, the twice yearly releases are really about new capability.
And my last statement, sorry, Andy, is that if anybody needs help with doing these upgrades, we're there to help support them because it's always important to stay as current as possible.
And these upgrades are coming, whether you want them to come or not. So you better get some help.
Yep.
Eddie, the furthest behind you've ever seen a customer be in terms of generations.
Oh, well, ServiceNow puts guardrails around that a while back. It used to be N-2. I think I've seen back in the day, I think I saw maybe four, and the platform was just dying on the vine. They weren't really actively expanding it. But yeah, N-1 is the sweet spot, I think. I do want to wrap up with one thought that Mike touched on a minute ago with predictive AI being available on the platform for a while, which is for the lay people in their AI. Predictive AI takes data from the past and tries to predict or speculate on what might happen in the future. Generative AI is what's happening now. It can wrap up a meeting and Gen AI can take the notes from that meeting and put a concise synopsis or summary right there for you. So it's a very different tool. Gen AI is active and it's engaged with you right now, where predictive has its spot, but it was data driven from past experiences.
Yeah, that's awesome. As you say that, every time I go to hit record on this, I've got an opportunity to hit with AI, cloud AI or whatever Zoom's calling it, and I haven't done it yet. I think it's a feature I got to turn on anyway, but I'm curious to see what it would think and say about what we're doing here. I wonder if it's going to help coach us through it and do it differently, or if it's going to take what we produce and turn around and polish it up and help us, have something better to present.
Well, that's the nightmare. What does it think about what we're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I made a comment the other day online that the biggest part of generative AI to me is going to be the coaching that it's going to be able to provide you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Well, guys, I appreciate this. Another session in the books here, and we'll look forward to doing it again in a couple weeks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.